The sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my home office, glinting off my laptop screen. A gentle beep disturbed the faint hush of the space. A new message. I adjusted in my leather chair and glanced at my phone, arching an eyebrow at the sender. It was from my spouse, someone I'd long suspected of playing both sides. Over the last few months, I'd felt the shift in their demeanor, noticed the sly glances and the clipped words. The text I read that morning, however, was the final confirmation I needed. I'm done. By the time you read this, I'll have made the necessary arrangements. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I let out a slow breath, quietly absorbing the gut punch that confirmation always brings. I'd braced for it, but no amount of mental preparation spares you from the sting of betrayal. Still, I didn't allow a single tremor to show. Caution had become my constant companion in recent weeks, and I wouldn't break my composure now. In fact, I allowed myself a small smile. This was not the first shock I'd received in the last few days. Earlier that week, I'd walked into my father's office at Titanic's Ventures, the family-owned empire I'd poured my heart and soul into building. My father, who could slice through a boardroom like a harpoon through water, had barely looked at me when I approached his imposing oak desk. He clicked the top of his pen once, then pulled off his wire-rimmed glasses in a measured gesture. "I need you to pack up your things, son," he'd said, and my heart dropped like a stone. "Your brother's taking your position. We won't be needing you anymore." It had taken a moment for me to find my voice. "You're demoting me?" I said in disbelief, even though I should not have been surprised. My father had always favored my brother, perhaps because my brother knew how to charm, schmooze, and placate. I believed in building from within and forging solid partnerships, while my brother believed in power plays and short-term gains. Apparently, I was too idealistic for the family brand. Demotion? My father let out a dismissive chuckle. "No, I'm terminating your employment. We can't even trust you in a lesser capacity. You're just a liability." I remember the fierce heat that crept up my neck. A liability. The man who had taught me how to hold a golf club at age 7, who had once praised me for being a meticulous planner, now deemed me nothing more than an obstacle. My brother hovered nearby in the office, wearing the smug, half-lidded look of someone who just found out he'd be handed the keys to the kingdom. My kingdom. I'd built entire departments from scratch. I'd negotiated the biggest contracts in the company's history. I believed in the company's success, had defended it against lawsuits, had poured years of my life into an enterprise that never truly appreciated me. And now, in a single breath, it was all gone. I exhaled slowly, controlling my face so it remained neutral. My father's eyes narrowed, waiting for an outburst that never came. Instead, I gave a curt nod and turned to leave. At the doorway, I paused, then glanced back. "Good luck," I murmured, permitting myself a small, knowing smile. He and my brother exchanged a puzzled look. They didn't realize that I held the digital keys to every new contract in the pipeline, and had quietly enacted a plan I'd prepared months earlier, the moment I'd first started suspecting the tides would turn against me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. My father and brother had become reckless in their deals, making dangerous promises to secure short-term capital. I'd known it was a matter of time before they pinned the fallout on me, so I had taken steps. I thought of those steps now, in my private office at home, my spouse's text glowing on my phone screen. All at once, I murmured to the silence. First my father's betrayal, now my spouse's. My personal life and professional life were unspooling simultaneously, yet for all that, I felt strangely calm. I set my phone aside and closed my laptop decisively. I had other matters to attend to. That same day, I received further communication from my spouse, an email this time more formal, outlining legal jargon about equitable distribution and intangible assets. They sounded like they were dancing with excitement, convinced they blindsided me at the perfect moment. I pictured their self-satisfied expression, perhaps imagining me tearing at my hair, cursing fate, bemoaning the avalanche of misfortune. Maybe they assumed I'd be desperate, that I'd beg for mercy or come crawling back to the family for support. They couldn't be more wrong. I knew about the affair, for one, though I hadn't confronted my spouse about it. My father's cynicism had taught me the value of strategy. Screaming matches and dramatic confrontations rarely yield the upper hand. Instead, I'd quietly updated my personal finances, transferring some assets into secure accounts beyond anyone's easy reach. I'd formed an LLC in my name only, for consulting. I'd also begun forging relationships with several high-value clients who admired my dedication and ethic, telling them, in broad strokes, that I might be going independent soon. At each stage, I took digital precautions, saving communications, snapshots of suspicious text messages, bank statements, anything that might help me if it came to a courtroom fight. I reread the text from my spouse. "I'm done. By the time you read this, I'll have made the necessary arrangements. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." I typed a one-line reply. "Understood. Good luck." Just as I had with my father, I wouldn't grant them the spectacle of my despair. I allowed myself another slight smile. This was the final confirmation. Let them believe I was beaten. Let them believe I was merely walking away in a daze. Every cunning opponent underestimates the silent ones, and I had learned from the best in the business, my father. My father prided himself on picking apart softness and people, and he considered me too sentimental. However, that very sentiment was what fueled my loyalty to Titanic's Ventures. I had known the company down to its marrow. I understood how critical it was to carefully handle new client negotiations, how to orchestrate marketing campaigns to woo prospective partners, and how to translate that into multi-year contracts. Because of my father's unrelenting demands, I was forced to develop an ironclad organizational system for all our deals. Entire expansions hinged on the leads and contacts I nurtured. Unbeknownst to them, I'd set up proprietary software to store all the crucial data, everything from client interest surveys to the detailed breakdown of contract obligations. It was a system I'd coded for Titanic's, but the intellectual property remained under my name because I'd established it prior to finalizing the official contract with Titanic's. A subtle but vital piece of paper filed months ago, ensuring that if they ever tried to oust me, I'd have the right to reclaim or revoke their license to use the software. So when my father sneered, "You're just a liability," I fought to hide my grin. In truth, I was the backbone of every deal they were about to make. The father I used to idolize had sabotaged his own empire by cutting me loose without ensuring they had full access to the pipeline or the system. And regarding my spouse, well, let's just say I'd been generous in our marriage, but not blind. I kept track of financial entanglements. I knew how easily they might try to paint me as the incompetent spouse, especially if they gleaned I was at odds with my family, so I protected myself. My personal accounts had been diversified months before, placed under a trust that bore only my name. That trust was separate property, untouchable by marital distribution, thanks to ironclad documentation. Let the betrayer come for me with grand visions of draining my hard-earned wealth. They'd find little left to siphon. When I arrived at the lawyer's office to address my spouse's claims, I saw them in the hallway through the glass panels. A crisp suit, an expensive watch, that smug posture. They looked like a cat that had finally caught the mouse. The attorney at their side was formidable, wearing the stony expression of a seasoned litigator. I entered, greeting them calmly, ignoring the tension in the air. During the meeting, my spouse's lawyer outlined a series of demands: spousal support, assets from my name, certain investment accounts. I listened politely, occasionally tapping notes into my phone. Then came the kicker. They hinted at uncovering hidden assets that I might have. I smiled politely and let them talk, offering no arguments, simply responding, "Interesting." My spouse seemed to interpret my politeness as defeat. Their eyes glittered with triumph. I recognized that expression. It mirrored my brother's face when he received my father's official nod of approval, that smug glow. But to me, it only signaled that they had no idea what was coming next. Because they didn't know, for instance, that I'd already locked in an agreement with 3 of Titanic's largest clients. I'd been meeting with them quietly after my father fired me, forging a separate entity, my new consultancy. They were intrigued because Titanic's culture had grown toxic under my father and brother's short-sighted leadership. The big clients craved reliability and ethical negotiations, qualities I'd brought to the table since day one. Meanwhile, my father was in an even bigger hurry to finalize those very same contracts, except now he lacked the crucial data I'd possessed, because I alone held the decryption keys, the final confirmations, and the personal rapport with those clients. My brother tried to replicate my role, but it was like handing a scalpel to someone who'd never performed surgery. Over the next 2 weeks, my father's calls began. At first, they were stiff and formal. "Son," he said in one voicemail, the one time he didn't bark out my name like a general addressing a soldier, "I want you to come in and clarify a few items in your notes. Your brother can't seem to make heads or tails of these documents." My father never asked for help. He demanded it. The fact he was even pretending to speak softly suggested how dire the situation had become. I didn't respond. Each day I received new voicemails that escalated in tension, culminating in a final, furious demand. "I know you're ignoring me, and it's disrespectful," he snarled. "You have an obligation to Titanic's to see these deals through. You'd better show up." An obligation. The nerve. My father had fired me, exiled me, dismissed me as worthless. Now he insisted I had an obligation. I merely archived his messages as a neat little collection of evidence, should he decide to twist the story down the road. Within the next month, Titanic's unraveling became public news. Negotiations with their top-tier partners had stalled, leading to missed deadlines and breach of contract penalties. I understood exactly why. My father and brother were flailing, trying to replicate the systems I'd built without the know-how or the relationships needed to keep them stable. Rumors on the street said Titanic's finances had become shaky. Their stock value dipped, and in a matter of weeks, the once mighty corporation found itself at a crossroads. My father scrambled, seeking last-minute loans to patch the bleeding holes in the hull of his sinking ship. Meanwhile, in the sphere of my personal life, my spouse discovered that draining me of funds wouldn't be as easy as they'd hoped. The bank accounts they demanded access to no longer contained large sums, and the intangible assets they thought they'd claim were protected under a legal trust that predated our marriage. When they demanded I produce records proving their inaccessibility, I complied without fanfare, handing them ironclad documentation. The attorney's eyes flicked over the pages, searching for a loophole, but found none. My spouse's entire posture changed in an instant. Shoulders tensed, eyes narrowed. This wasn't supposed to be how it went. I could almost read their mind. Where was the heartbreak? The meltdown? The frantic attempts at negotiation? I offered none of it. I continued on, calm, polite, stepping out of the lawyer's office with a courteous nod. If my spouse wanted to leave me for someone else, or for the promise of a bigger payday, good riddance. They'd find neither sympathy nor wealth at my door. With Titanic's decline making headlines, I scheduled a private meeting with my new clients, the 3 heavy hitters that had once looked to Titanic's for partnership. We sat in a quiet, upscale restaurant. They arrived expecting to see me disheveled, perhaps, or jumpy, but I greeted them with steady composure and laid out a simple plan. I'm establishing a new consultancy, I told them. You've seen my track record. I know how to honor a contract and build a relationship that lasts. I'll give you better terms than Titanic's did, and in return, I want exclusivity for a set period. They studied me, weighed my words against the chaos swirling in the corporate tabloids, then finally agreed with decisive nods. We've always valued your ethical approach, one of them said. Titanic's was becoming untenable. We're in. That night, I raised a single glass of whiskey to the empty room in my home office. The shadows lengthened across the floor, but I didn't feel alone. This success was mine and mine alone, untainted by the paternal scowls and the sidelong glances from a spouse who should have had my back. I felt a surge of energy that I hadn't felt in years. News traveled fast. Within days, smaller clients left Titanic's for my consultancy, seeing that the real brain behind Titanic's success had set up a new venture. My phone rang off the hook with inquiries. Everyone wanted to know where I was heading and if they could follow. Meanwhile, Titanic's had to freeze expansions. Cash flow was no longer certain. My father burned through his last reservoirs of pride, calling me in desperation to reconsider coming back on retainer. I listened to his voicemail, his tone suddenly humble, offering sweeteners and hush money. There was a time I would have leapt at the chance, desperate for my father's praise. Now it rang hollow. I deleted the message. Months slipped by. The day of my final divorce proceedings arrived. The settlement was straightforward by then. My spouse realized they would gain little beyond what we already owned jointly. Most of that I willingly signed over, much to their shock. The house? They could have it, along with the furniture and the car. Material objects meant little to me after everything I'd been through. I had a new life to build. Standing in the courthouse hallway, I placed my signature on the last page. My spouse, who seemed more sullen than triumphant, let their pen hover for a long moment before scrawling their name. They looked up at me then, eyes full of an emotion that might have been regret. Perhaps they finally realized I'd never been the weak link. Perhaps they saw that I had never needed them to survive. If they had regrets, that was their burden to carry. I felt oddly weightless, like a diver breaking through the surface of the water and filling their lungs with fresh air. As I stepped outside, I inhaled the crisp air, felt the sunlight on my face. Some part of me wanted to look back, to see if they were watching me from the courthouse doors, maybe about to say something, but I didn't. I simply walked forward. And in the weeks that followed, the final downfall of Titanic's ventures played out in dramatic fashion. The board removed my father, appointing a crisis manager to salvage what remained. My brother tried to position himself as the rightful heir, but the board members looked at the record of missed deals and broken promises, shook their heads, and cut him loose as well. The family business dissolved in a swirl of lawsuits and humiliating headlines. I read about it from the comfort of my new office suite, an elegant space in a downtown high-rise. My own consultancy thrived, having taken on a fresh wave of clients that recognized my work ethic and moral compass. Friends and former colleagues occasionally texted me updates on the meltdown, like the ironically comedic fact that my brother was facing potential legal scrutiny for forging documents in his scramble to keep the deals afloat. One mid-afternoon, as I was tidying my desk, I received an unexpected visitor, my father. He stood at the reception area, stoop-shouldered, no longer wearing the crisp arrogance that once defined him. He asked if I could spare a moment. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed, leading him into my office. He glanced around at the furnishings. Sleek, modern, a far cry from the dark, antique-laden design he'd always favored. Then his gaze landed on me. For a moment, he seemed lost for words. Finally, he cleared his throat. I made mistakes, he managed, voice subdued. I never expected the company to. He trailed off. I waited, carefully maintaining a neutral expression. If he expected me to jump in with a comforting phrase, he was in for a disappointment. It was your brother, he said at last, as if shifting blame. He went behind my back. I couldn't control everything at once. He paused. I'm sorry for how I treated you. A long silence settled. I studied him, recalling all the times I'd wanted to earn that apology, dreamed of my father admitting wrongdoing. But now, so much time and destruction lay in our wake that it felt hollow. The damage was done. I offered a quiet reply. I appreciate you coming by. But I'm not the same person you fired. I've moved on. I leaned back in my chair. I wish you well, Dad, but I can't help you. I saw the flicker of desperation in his eyes, mingling with shock. He'd likely told himself that a single apology would suffice to bring me back, but there was no going back. He rose slowly from the chair. For a brief moment, my father, once the unstoppable CEO, once the man I'd spent my life trying to make proud, looked every bit his age. He nodded, murmured something indistinct, and walked out, shoulders hunched. I didn't feel triumph in that moment, only a certain clarity. I had reached the place I needed to be, self-sufficient, independent, ready to build my future without seeking approval from those who never truly had my back. My father wanted me as a safety net for his empire, just as my spouse wanted me as a stepping stone toward wealth. But now, with all illusions shattered, I was free. 2 months later, I sat in a sunlit cafe near my new offices, sipping a latte. Business was booming. My new clients had referred me to additional partners, and my consultancy was on the cusp of expanding. I was meeting with a recruitment specialist after lunch, hoping to hire top talent for my growing firm. Halfway through my latte, I saw a familiar figure on the sidewalk outside, my former spouse. They wandered listlessly, scanning the hustle and bustle of the street until their eyes locked on me through the cafe window. For a moment, they froze, maybe wondering if they should come inside or keep walking. I gave them a polite nod, acknowledging them. I couldn't quite read their expression. Shock, regret, maybe longing for the life they'd thrown away. They had once believed they'd break me with a dismissive text and a flock of lawyers. They'd orchestrated their exit, assuming I would crumble under the combined weight of losing my job and my marriage in the same week. Yet here I was, comfortable and confident, having leveraged intelligence and foresight to remain standing. They looked skittish, almost rattled, as if they realized they had nowhere to go but forward on that sidewalk, away from me. After a short, tense moment, they turned and disappeared into the crowd. I took another sip of my latte and felt nothing but a calm sense of finality. Our paths had truly diverged. Poetic justice, I thought, as I left the cafe and made my way toward my next meeting. My father and my spouse had both bet against me, believing I was nothing without their approval or presence. Instead, they discovered that I was far more capable than they had ever imagined. In the quiet hush of the elevator up to my firm's new suite, I allowed myself a wry, satisfied smile. Betrayal might have been the catalyst, but my triumph was built on my own strength, my own strategy. And there was no sweeter revenge than standing on my own 2 feet, thriving, unbowed, and entirely free.